Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Checks and Balances TV. Today's program is entitled The Ultimate Vacation, Your Journey Towards Retirement. Summer is almost here, and as people everywhere consider their vacation plans, the price of a gallon of gasoline has become major headline news. But rising prices across the board affect more than just your vacation travel plans. They affect the ultimate vacation, your journey towards retirement. So let's see how today's news may impact your financial future. All of us are paying more to fuel up these days, including the fuel that many need to personally get going in the morning. Yep, that's coffee. Starbucks announced that the price of a 16-ounce bag of coffee will increase by 17% next month, from $11.95 to almost $15 per bag. The price increase of coffee across the U.S. has even outpaced gasoline in the last year. While gas is up 37%, coffee has increased by more than 40% over the same time period. Okay, so what's really going on here? Let's check the facts using our checks and balances process. The price of coffee, among other consumable goods, is on the rise. Coffee topped $3 a pound for the first time in more than 30 years. And corn surged another 79% in just the last 12 months. According to a recent Rasmussen poll, 91% of Americans believe they're spending more money at the grocery store than they did just 1 year ago. And they're right. Recent Consumer Price Index figures released by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics state that over the last 12 months, the rate of inflation has reached 3.2%. And most of that can be attributed to the rise in food and energy, two of the items consumers need to buy the most. Americans are getting hit hard at the grocery store with food prices increasing by almost 4% in the last 12 months. Specifically, beef and pork prices are up over 10%, eggs are up almost 5%, dairy is up 6.3%, vegetables cost 4.5% more, and cereal and bakery products are up 2.2% from last year. Consumers are also feeling the financial pressure at the pump, with gas prices up more than 35% from this time last year and closing in on record high prices that haven't been seen since 2008. And to top it all off, utility bills are also increasing, with energy prices growing by more than 19% since last year. Okay, so you may be asking yourself, Matt, what does all of this really mean to me? Well, now that we've checked the facts, let's balance this news using our checks and balances process to determine what action you should take today. The economic recovery is still underway, yet its real benefit is questionable. Depending on whom you listen to, experts are debating the likelihood of inflation. While the CPI, or Consumer Price Index, is traditionally used as an inflation predictor, the Federal Reserve uses the core inflation number, which is the total inflation rate minus the increase of food and energy prices, which would suggest that inflation has only been 1.3%. According to the Fed, the price of gas and food varies so widely due to non-economic activities such as war or weather that it makes it impossible to assess the increase or decrease in the value of the dollar. They believe that 1.3% is an accurate core inflationary rate, even though most Americans would consider this foolishness, not to include the true increase of food and energy into the total inflationary rate. The real story here is that our dollar buys less and less nowadays, and many attribute this to inflation. In fact, the same Rasmussen poll that found Americans are spending more at the grocery store today than they did this time last year also found that more than half of all Americans do not believe the Federal Reserve Board will be able to keep inflation under control and interest rates down in the future. Inflation, however, is just one of the reasons behind the dollar's potential decline. Federal spending has finally hit its max by reaching the federal debt ceiling. But rather than curbing spending, Washington representatives have said they will now borrow money from other surpluses to fund government operations. This will continue until at least August 2nd, which is the extended deadline for Congress to decide how to address the looming national debt. If they raise the debt ceiling, the U.S. would then be able to borrow more money overseas. However, if Congress decides not to raise the debt ceiling once again, the U.S. may eventually default on some of its outstanding debts, potentially harming foreign investor relations and driving down the value of the dollar even further. Okay, so what's the bottom line here? Not only are Americans worried about the possible effects of inflation on their savings and investments, but they're now concerned about how our national debt may impact their financial future. Since reaching the debt ceiling, the government is currently no longer allowed to borrow more money, which is probably a good thing. But as a consequence, the government announced that it would now need to tap into federal retirement pension programs to help pay for some federal operations. But they say this will not have a negative impact on retirees because the Treasury is legally required to reimburse the federal pension program. Sounds similar to our Social Security Trust Fund dilemma to me. On the road to a successful retirement, make sure your nest egg can go the distance in retirement, and that whatever you've saved for today will hold its value tomorrow. And whether it's inflation or the government's inaction or actions that may be driving down the value of our dollar, you need to have a plan in place to keep your purchasing power strong, both now and into the future. And now for Matt's weekly financial tip, tool, or technique. Today's financial lesson is on combating inflation. In inflationary times, the purchasing power of our dollar goes down, which can have an extremely negative effect on your retirement savings. So here are 3 tips that you can use to stay ahead of inflation while protecting your retirement nest egg. Tip number 1, invest a small percentage of your nest egg in goods or commodities. Generally, commodities are basic resources and agricultural products, such as iron ore, crude oil, coal, salt, sugar, coffee beans, soybeans, aluminum, copper, rice, wheat, gold, silver, and platinum. Historically, while the purchasing power of money goes down during inflation, the prices of goods and commodities can greatly increase. By the way, the wisest way to invest in commodities is within a mutual fund or exchange-traded fund. Tip number 2, pay down your debts. Interest rates at most lending institutions have a tendency to rise during times of inflation. Why? Because lenders realize that if their interest rates don't increase with inflation, they won't be making as much money off of you. In order to combat rising interest rates along with inflation, consider paying off or at least paying down your debts. Also, in addition to rising interest rates you may be paying in the future, a devaluing dollar will have you paying even more for your purchases that were charged to your credit cards in the past. So pay off or pay down those debts and then leave those credit cards alone. And tip number 3 is review your portfolio allocation. Investing in ultra-conservative financial vehicles can prove costly to your nest egg over time. If your money is safe from stock market loss, but your interest rate after taxes is not keeping up with inflation, you are losing buying power. In order to stay ahead of inflation, it's important to reevaluate your current investments and make any necessary changes to help hedge against future inflation. Whether it's higher prices at the pump or for your morning cup of joe, inflation is definitely not a friend to your retirement plan and cannot be ignored. Your journey towards retirement needs a good map, and in most cases, a professional guide. Consider finding a qualified financial advisor to help you reach your final retirement destination on time and ahead of inflation. In this week's CBTV poll, we're asking Americans an important question. How concerned are you about inflation? Log on to answer this poll at www.checksandbalances.tv. And while you're on the site, be sure to request our newest free report in our Truth About series. And it's on the truth about banks. You will learn the pros and cons of keeping too much money in the bank and the true cost of leaving your money in the bank over time. And finally, remember that only you can control your financial future. You can succeed. You just need confidence and determination. I'm Matthew J. Rettick from Checks and Balances TV. Until next week, dump debt, invest wisely, believe in yourself, and make it happen.